So, keeping on the subject of crime, I want to talk about the idea of restorative justice. There is actually an organization, I think it's called Restorative Justice UK or just Restorative Justice, and they promote the concept. I was somewhat familiar with this, but admittedly, I didn't know all the details. But basically, the idea is that by letting the victim confront the offender, it can bring some closure to both parties. Now, they had a video and I'll put a link in this to that video. And although it's actors in the video, the words they're using are verbatim exactly as was used in the real case study. And basically, it's a woman who had her house burgled, and the young woman sitting opposite her is the burglar. And she's done it whilst high on heroin or to feed her heroin habit. Again, like the last video I made, it just again shows that drugs are just poison in society. But the woman was obviously, tense. Um, and first of all, the burglar said she was sorry. She said she'd done it to feed her heroin habit. And she also explained the reason she didn't take items like laptops and so on, but rather took jewelry, which is more sentimental to the victim, was because it had a higher street value. Anyway, the victim, again, these were actors but based on real people, mentioned that that was the sentimental stuff that can never be replaced, things that were given to her by her daughter and so on. Anyway, the meeting ended where reconciled, I'm not sure is the right word, but the two women sort of, were very honest with each other about what they'd been through. At the start, the moderator or whatever title she would be called said, "We went over the rules. There's no interrupting." So this is my take on the idea of restorative justice. I should say, by the way, the burglar said that my time in prison got me to think about things. So obviously she'd been to prison first. That's very important. Um, I think the principle is probably a good one because one thing that a lot of victims of crime want more than anything, I mean, I know I would, is to confront the perpetrators. But apparently, these sort of meetings are set up in such a way, and it's not always face to face. Sometimes it's by email or letters. But face to face meetings are vetted carefully. They make sure that the victim and the offender both agree. Obviously, if the offender doesn't agree, they're going to be hostile, and that won't be good for the victim. The victim obviously has to agree, but say need to be comfortable with the situation. According to their website, 85% of participants, victims of crime, say it's worthwhile. Now, that's a pretty high ratio. If that's accurate, clearly there's something good in that. What I would say, though, just observing it, is some of the language that's used on the site, and I've sent them an email sort of asking them to clarify this. They talk about sort of conflict mediation. Well, if you have antisocial behavior, if you have jobs tormenting a family, that's not conflict resolution. That isn't like two parties having a dispute. That's one party harassing another, tormenting another, and it should be viewed that way. So I'm uneasy about the idea of mediating when it comes to victims and offenders because mediating implies that both parties are responsible. It's kind of a conflict resolution type situation. So I've asked them to clarify that. Obviously, I think there will be circumstances where it wouldn't work. The offender has to show genuine remorse and they have to have pleaded guilty to what they've done. Because obviously, if they say they're innocent, that's not going to work. Um, and the victim has to be comfortable about doing it. I imagine there'll be certain types of crimes that are particularly sensitive. A woman who's been raped, or a man who's been raped for that matter, confronting the rapist. Would be particularly intimidating, I would imagine. Or, a gang member who's assaulted someone, circumstances like that. With a burglary, although it's still a really damaging crime, it's a bit more hands off insofar as there's not physical violence involved. At least it wasn't in this case. So clearly it has to be vetted for the particular circumstances of the crime. I would say that the victim has to be allowed to express all emotions. Yes, anxiety, yes, fear, yes, the what that's done, but I would also say anger, raw anger. And I think they should be allowed to say what they think of the offender because this is part of it. This is reality. I mean, if they're basing the whole thing on kind of resolution and civility, it's not really realistic. But 85% is a very high ratio. So clearly they're doing something right. But um, I also feel that it should only be used after the punishment has been enacted. So, for example, a burglar goes into someone's house, they serve prison time, then they can maybe get involved in something like this. What I wouldn't agree with is, and again, this is a point I wanted them to clarify, are they suggesting that it's an alternative method? Because if that's the case, I mean, I am a staunch believer in justice. I mean, for example, the case I've just cited, the Banbury torture case, you could never have a situation where those four gang members were with this young woman and they say, "Oh, we're very sorry, we shouldn't have done it." Not, not before they'd spent years in prison. So there has to be punishment first of all, I would say. But anyway, there may be different formats of this around the world. It's not just used in the UK. I'm not totally against it. I think there could definitely be some merit in it if it gives the victim an opportunity to ask questions. Why did you do this to me? Do you know the impact this has had on me? And so on. Um, and the offender to express their remorse if they are sincere, as opposed to just get out of jail free card or a leniency card. I mean, the thing about remorse, it has to be sincere because anyone can say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it." But whether it's sincere or not is another question. I would say body language is a big factor in that. Um, because I think simply saying I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it isn't enough. Has to be. I mean, as the burglar said in this case, I can never get the jewelry back. I can't turn that around. But I didn't think about my consequences, about the impact this would have on someone else, and I know it would. I wouldn't have liked that done to me, and she sort of kept her head down and so on. That would maybe indicate genuine remorse. I'm not totally cynical. People can change, but I do think we have some real depraved thugs and fuggettes in this country who will say anything to get off the hook. But you know, uh, I think the principle is probably a good one. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Do you know anything about this? If you were a victim of crime, would you want to confront the perpetrator in this sort of setting? And bear in mind, it's all talking. You wouldn't be allowed to like lash out at them. I personally want to, but they probably wouldn't let you do that, obviously. So I just wonder how they approach raw anger. I mean, do they let victims really express it and say basically, I think you're a scumbag for what you've done to me? Because I think if it's overtly focused on civility, and like, oh, I want to understand you, and I want to understand why you did it. I honestly don't think most victims of crime would feel that way. I think they'd be angry. I think they'd be fuming. Yeah, there'd be anxiety, and yeah, they'd want to know why it happened. But I think realistically, there'd be a lot more anger. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'll put a link to either the video or their website, maybe both if I can.